we talk about drugs, we talk about drug laws, we talk about banning drugs. This was tried in the 20s with the temperance issue. It didn't work. It won't work here either. And it does bring to mind the issue of women's control of their bodies. I have to admit. Now, again, I'm not arguing. I would never argue that there's not rules or laws that you can have to eliminate some things. I mean, I have to, but I don't want to seem a hypocrite here. I mean, I am all for, if not banning weaponry of war in civilian hands, at least registering it, licensing it, making sure that if you're going to have guns, you know how to use, all that kind of stuff. I really, really would prefer not to end up in a puddle of blood because some guy who's got a small penis is going to shoot me for something, and unfortunately that could pretty easily happen. And in fact, as we've seen every single day, right? For how long? It's pretty common in this country. I mean, there's
Yeah.
320 million of us and some 380 million guns. I mean, seriously? And we're not just talking sporting weapons either, right? We're
Yeah, I mean,
talking
I'm
weapons
a
of
good
war.
deal. I'm a good deal more. I'm more. I don't know. I'm with Marx on the don't disarm the workers sort of thing. However, of course, so the gun thing is a big issue, and I think that the problem is bigger than just access. It's kind of like the drugs thing. Um, but to your point, yeah, there's certainly things. It makes me re-examine a lot of those things, but there's certainly things that I don't think are that need to, at the very least, be heavily regulated. You
Yeah,
know,
at
it's
least, at least that.
yeah, yeah,
On the other
yeah.
hand, I really and truly do not think there's no reason short of war for somebody like you or me to have a 50 caliber sniper rifle. There simply isn't. I mean, make the argument. Well, what we want revolution? Look, I mean, no. Actually, I would really much, 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 much rather figure out a way to peacefully move us. The Salvador Allende model. I know it didn't work, at least then in 1970. But the peaceful move to socialism rather than a violent overthrow. Because one of the things that happens when you start with violence, man, you don't know where it's going to end. You do not know where it's going to end, and the odds are that it'll end badly. May not, but it could. Be that as it may. Be that as it may. I think there are some things that should be and could be regulated, right? And I think and so I think though that like the whole drug issue, the regulation of women's reproductive rights, reproductive ability. Forget the word rights. It's the regulation of a woman's body by the state is absolutely crazy. I mean, we know where this ends. I mean, actually, we don't know where it ends. We know where it goes. I mean, it may end with the banning, as this so-called Supreme Court of the United States, this corrupt court, has alluded to. They're not all corrupt, I know, but the Supreme Court has alluded to getting rid of or again making illegal again gay marriage, making illegal again interethnic marriage. Right? I refuse to call it interracial marriage because it's one race, just different
Race doesn't
pigmentation.
exist.
Yes, right. And that's what those guys are doing. But they're starting with this issue of a woman's right to control her reproductive ability, and they do it in the most dishonest ways, the most dishonest ways. So first of all, if you if you pass laws, as have been done, to eliminate legal abortion, what you will unequivocally do, is make sure that abortions are unsafe. And that's all you'll do. You will not decrease abortions. There's papers on this written in the pre-Roe era. It's as clear as can be that you are condemning women to death by by infection, perforated uterus. They will die. You can't be pro-life about that. The second thing that's dishonest, and it's profoundly dishonest, is the what is it, the 6 week heartbeat. There is no 6 week heartbeat. There may be electrical activity in this clump of cells. There is no heart. There is no heartbeat. It just isn't so. Organogenesis does not happen at that early. And the third thing that's dishonest, is profoundly dishonest, is this phenomena, this term late. It's called late term abortion. There's no such thing. Nothing. It doesn't exist. What does exist, and it's incredibly sad when it happens, is there are babies that are born with no brains or with spinal cords that are not encased in a spinal canal. They've got no ability to live. And those children, those little babies, are aborted, but it's incredibly rare. It's usually late, not always. It's incredibly rare. Incredibly. There's no kids born and the mom decides to abort it, so they kill it. That just doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. But this is complete dishonesty by the so-called pro-life. They're not pro-life. They're just pro-birth, and the right wing of this country. That's all it is. And why would they do that? Why would they do that? And I think there's a bunch of reasons. One of which is to control women. That's for sure. But another reason is they don't like the coloration. Is that what the right term? The coloration of America. They don't like that. And so they want more white babies. That's what they want. They want more white babies. That has been explicitly commented upon, noted by some of these
and it's actually been
folks.
carried out. I mean, forced sterilizations against people's will,
Yes.
without their knowledge. That is a thing that this country did to black folks. That is
Did
actually
does.
does.
Yeah. There was a guy. Where was he? He was one of the prison doctors, one of the, I believe, ICE doctors. He was called, what was he called? The uterus doctors. He was performing hysterectomies. I mean, on women. I mean, there's like, this stuff existed and exists. Now, again, it's not, I don't want to over exaggerate. It's not like happening every minute, everywhere. But this kind of abuse does exist. So on the one hand, it's the removal of a woman's ability to control her body, which is how, I don't care what form you think about it, that's just plain wrong. A woman is not an incubator. Full stop. Full stop. The second part, another part, it has to do with basically, frankly, racism. The right would prefer more white babies. They don't want brown and black babies, right? They are not pro-life. They are pro-racist. They are not pro-life. They are pro-birth. They are not pro-life. If they are pro-life, what they would do, which of course they will never do, is fund prenatal care, a national health system, child care, time off for moms and dads when kids are born, and on and on and on and on. They don't care about that because they don't care about kids. They don't care in the slightest. So I think this is, there's a million ways to think about all the problems we see. But I think we have to be, on the left, I consider myself on the left, we have to kind of be, is a term, intersectional about this. I love that term. I have a friend who uses that term all the time. Intersectional. That's a great term. First of all, who are the people being most oppressed, most abused, most at risk at the moment that we're living? Right, the most. Right now, the open calls for attack are on the LGBTQ community. Not the biggest community in the country, and the trans kids aren't the biggest group in the country, but it doesn't matter. There are active calls to hurt that community. So I think we have to stand with them. It's not a matter of size. It's a matter of where the fascist elements in our country think that they're going to start to poke and prod, and they think they can get away with it. So we can't allow that. We have to stand with them. We have to stand with women. Of course, we have to stand with people of color. Of course, we have to do all of this together.
Right.
I mean, it's you. There is an old saying on the left that no one's free till everyone's free, and that's certainly true today with regard to uh,
Yes.
both ethnicity, the civil rights, and woman's right to control her body. So
Yeah.
I think we have to stand.
Thomas Sankara famously said, "There is no liberation without women's liberation," and I think that's
Yes,
true of a lot of people.
and I think that's absolutely true. There's women's liberation is not enough.
Yeah,
It's more,
for
right.
all
It's
people.
like we have to fight for liberation, for justice, for everybody, even the weakest among us. We have to. And some folks have a problem with that. And well, I mean, but I don't know about these trans guys. I don't know. I'm not trans, so like I don't know. No, no. You don't have to like somebody to treat them as a political friend, a comrade. You don't have to like them. It matters though that you stand with them where it's appropriate. And if they or if we step out of line, we should be criticized. No question about it. I mean, I have had these discussions for years now, for example, with regard to the Palestinian movement. And there are folks who say, well, I'd sort of like to support the Palestinians, but they just keep doing this stuff that makes me not want to support. I say, excuse me, excuse me. First of all, you hear what the press wants you to hear, number one. Number two, an oppressed people does what they have to do to try and overthrow their oppressors. I mean, I would love it to be all honey and candles and, sweetness, but it's not so. You stand for justice. You stand for justice. Full stop. Not against Jewish people, against the Israeli state, but not against Jewish people, absolutely. And if our Palestinian brothers and sisters move out of line, as it were, not out of line, but do something that is inappropriate, we think politically, we comment on that. We make a statement about that. There's no question about it. We have to stand for justice for all, and that in this case, and our moment, is with the LGBTQ community, women, and frankly, I think internationally with the Palestinians. That's what I think.
And I think it's worth saying, the connection here is where these things dovetail is. You can think that you can, I mean, abortion can bother you. It can be, you can be someone who thinks there should be less abortion. That is okay. But do you want less abortion? Well, much like drugs, the answer is very clear, and it's not to criminalize abortion. It is not.
That's right.
If you want more babies being taken care of, the answer is not to make abortion illegal. If you want more, all by all
Illegal,
metrics,
illegal,
yeah,
illegal,
exactly,
illegal.
exactly.
Yeah, no. It's so there are examples in the world. So in the European Union, one of the highest performers in this area is the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, uh, sex education happens early and comprehensively. Birth control is available at will without mom and dad's permission, anywhere and for free. Abortion um, is available anywhere. It's tax funded, full stop. And they have the lowest incidence of pregnancy and abortion, I believe, in the EU. I don't think it's in the world, but it's in the EU. Because the ability to not get pregnant, there's also, by the way, if you want to have a child, there's a safety net for that as well in that country. So, but if you don't want to have a child, the ability to know what you're doing if you're going to have sex, as people will do, so that you don't get pregnant, to have birth control so you don't get pregnant, that all exists, and they have the lowest rate again, I believe it's in the EU. There are examples that work. We could do this if we wanted to. Again, this is not a matter of wanting to decrease abortions. I don't believe that for a moment that that's what the so-called Christian right or the right wing in this country wants. They don't want to decrease abortions. What they really want to do is control women and have more white babies. That's what they
Well,
really want to do.
I think that I mean, that may even be the case in terms of like the individuals who vote for these guys. Like, I think that there's a disconnect between what the people pushing this sort of stuff, and the people getting voted in on the back of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe what the individual. I mean, okay, there's some hypocrites. They're just awful people, and they're awful people. We dismiss them, write that percentage off, however many that is. But I think that there's some folks who are like, they're being told this stuff, and they're being presented it in a way that makes it seem like it's either this or that. It's either, this is the solution to that. Making abortion illegal is the solution to there being, to the issue of abortion, to there being less abortions. If you want less abortions, then vote for this guy. And I think that's a cynical move. I don't even, you know what I mean? It's not, I think that, I hope that if a lot of those people were presented with the concrete information, that they would be able to be swayed to the point of view that the answer to there being less abortion is to legalize abortion. Mm-hmm.
Right. So keep it legal, keep it safe, have sex ed, have birth control, right? All of that stuff. That I believe is the answer. But like much of reality, right? Reality, it's nuanced and it's a little complex, and it takes some thought. It's much easier to say just ban this stuff and put the doctors in jail. I mean, really. I mean, many years ago, when I was a fourth year medical student, my partner and I, this is a few years after Roe v. Wade, we signed up for an elective with the chairman of obstetrics and gynecology at UC Davis. That's where I was a medical student. A guy named Kenneth Nicewander. Dr. Nicewander, I'm sure, is dead now, but he was the only guy. He was a chair. He was the only person in that department who would perform abortions. The only one. And so my friend Michael and I signed up for this elective, and we signed up for it knowing full well, not knowing, but thinking that the right is going to try and reverse this and it'll become illegal again. And we need to know how to take care of our sisters. I still have the 3-ring binder, step by step, of everything that we did. And I have to say, I mean, how many of these procedures did I do? I honestly don't remember. Was it 30 or 50? I don't know. It was a month-long thing where we'd go to work every day and do a handful of them. But however many it was, I never saw, whether I was doing the procedure or my friend was, or how, it didn't matter. I never saw a single woman walk in, as the right likes to say, prance in and say, well, this is my birth control, I'm just going to get an abortion today. It was always a painful decision. It was always a painful decision. There's no question about it. It was always difficult for the women who had to make the decision, and it was their decision. It was their decision. It was their body. All we were doing was assisting them. The place where I work now, the pretty heavily religious, and folks like to say, we leave this in God's hands. We leave this in God's hands. And sometimes what I'll say to them is, yes, but remember, we are the tools. We are God's tools. And so what we should be doing here is this is what God might want, right? Well, and I mean, I don't mean to exaggerate, but we are the tools for these women to control their bodies. That's what we do. That's what we are, and that's what we did. So I think this is a really important deal. It's there's so many different threads that come in to this whole issue, that are just extremely worrisome. It's more than just a political issue. It is a political issue. It's an important one. But one of the trends that we've seen the last roughly 5 years in this country is a decrease in the longevity of our population. Right? For years, the longevity kind of gradually climbed, not because we were so great at putting people on ventilators or putting big catheters in them, but because we did a bunch of public health stuff and it worked. And people had houses and jobs and clean water and homes that had some aeration so you wouldn't get tuberculosis, all that kind of stuff. In the last 5 or so years, life expectancy in the United States has decreased. And this is not a small deal. Now, some of this, admittedly, is, of course, the deaths of despair, the opioid crisis, for sure. Some of it's the COVID, for sure. But some of it is our completely dysfunctional health system writ large, because it's not just hospitals and clinics, jobs, housing, food, everything, everything. And you don't see that. You don't see that except in failing societies. So it is an extremely worrisome trend. And then on top of that trend that we see, which is a kind of a mega trend, you see these rules being made by the I want to be polite, at least quasi-polite, by some of the most retrograde, troglodytic characters in our country, in our government, that would take away a woman's right to control her body. That would take away the ability of gay folks to be together, of a trans kid to figure out what they're going to do with themselves. It's just incredibly dangerous, and I'm just worried about where these trends all lead to be perfectly honest.
Fascism, probably.
Well, there's that word has been tossed around a lot, and I've done some tossing, but there is a specific definition, and although every fascist isn't Adolf Hitler, it's all true, right? I mean, you have to remember that in the government, the fascist government of Italy under Mussolini, at least initially, there were Jews in that government. They were not. They were not. They may have been racist in other ways, but they were not killing our Jewish brothers and sisters. It was only later that happened. So I'm afraid, I am really worried that the ugly head of fascism will rear itself again. And this time, we don't have a union movement. We don't have a real organized left movement to fight it. That is extremely worrisome.
I know.
I mean, we've been talking about this for 20, 30, for some 40, 30 or 40 years we've been talking about this. I mean, this is a really dangerous trend. Hence, one of the comments about the whole gun issue and violence issue in this country, right? I mean, the way that the right will move is to create violent events that will then be blamed on progressive elements, the left, and then they'll move in and try and break the back of whatever progressive movement there is.
Yeah, well, and don't forget the first people that I mean, like we talk about Hitler. The first people that Hitler went after were not the Jewish folks. It was not it was the leftists. It was the communists and the socialists.
Pastor Niemöller's poem. Pastor Niemöller's poem.
Right.
When they came for the communists, I wasn't a communist, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the union workers, but I wasn't a union worker, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to say anything. I mean, yes. So that is all worrisome. It's all worrisome. So there's multiple things we need to be concerned about, and of course, on top of all of that is our climate emergency, which there's no getting around. We're not dealing with that either. I mean, that's again, this is. There are engineers that you could talk to, you probably should talk to, have on this podcast from Stanford and from Columbia, who have done amazing work that shows, quite clearly, that with $1 trillion a year for a couple of decades, we could fix this problem with the technology we've got, full stop, done. And after the first 10 years, there's actually a return on investment. It wouldn't be that big a deal. We could do it. We waste that much money on weapons every single year, without a doubt. So, but we don't do anything. The leadership does essentially nothing. Now, to give Biden his due credit, he has moved. They did move with some of the most aggressive to date spending on the climate emergency, and that's important. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. And
dramatically not enough.
What's the worrisome thing is, does society as we know it break down? And if it does, we know where that will go too.
I think that there's a point to be made here, and that's that we know what the capitalist ruling class's plan for this is, for the oncoming climate emergency, and it's the same as they did for COVID. Let you fuckers die. Line them up
Mm-hmm.
and toss them in the garbage. We are at what 1.1 million people dead of COVID so
Yep.
far. Their plan
That's
with
probably an
climate change.
underestimate too, by the way. It's probably 20
Yes.
or 30% higher than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so it's I don't know the answer to it, but it's up to us to fight for this stuff. And one part of that is being the representatives of common sense. Socialism,
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, and all leftism to some degree, is the common sense position, and they will paint the left as pie in the sky, crazy idealists, or even worse, dangerous radicals.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't crazy. It's not. For example, one of the early socialist victories in the U.S. was the public sewer systems of Milwaukee. The sewer socialists, Gene Debs, all these guys, the Socialist Party in the U.S. And once upon a time, it was inconceivable, a radical, insane idea that the sewer system should be publicly owned. And there was shit in the streets. It was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee
Mm-hmm.
was particularly bad, but it was all over the country. And then one day these guys get into power, and this is power in a city, right? This is not
Right.
winning the presidency. It is power in one city.
Right.
That's something that you and your friends could do. That is a doable thing. And it swept the nation. It is now all the sewer systems are public because it's an insane way to do it. That is being the representatives of common sense. And this is common sense. Decriminalizing opiates so that and pumping money into rehabilitation. That is common sense. That is how it works. Legalizing abortion, that is common sense. And legalizing marijuana, as we see, right? Most Americans agree on that. That is common sense. Same thing, national health care. Common sense. And the fact of the matter is when you put it in front of people, when you tell people, you just divorced from all this rhetoric about it, you say, should there be Medicare for all? I mean, even now, with the divides that we have, hovering between 60 and 70% of Americans agree. Now, why don't we have that? If all of us agree, or enough of us agree, that we have the majority.
Well, people like to say, politicians. In fact, I just had this discussion with a friend this afternoon. He was arguing that we're really a 50-50 country. We're split 50-50 or 49-51. And so that's why we can never get things done. And so I stopped him. I said, actually, I think you're off base a little bit. I mean, it's true if you go to Washington, D.C., it's a 50-50 roughly split. It really is. But that's due to gerrymandering, and that's due to Citizens United. That's due to the fact that we have one of the most corrupt political systems in the world. It may not be the most corrupt, but it's a pretty corrupt system, right? You can buy anything you want.
Pretty bad.
But when you lay the ideas out in front of the American people, whether it's national health, climate emergency, education, we're really a 60-40 or 70-30 country in favor of the ideas that we support, that the progressive elements of us support. We really are. It just doesn't get translated because of the literal corruption of our political system. The question is, where does that end up? Because you can't continue on that forever without something going terribly, terribly wrong. It's already gone wrong. And it really does. It really worries me. I mean, does it worry me for me? I mean, look, I'm an old guy, and another 10 years I won't even be around, I expect. But for you and for my kids and for our grandkids, right? It really does worry me. And if it worries me for my family, it's worrisome for everybody else's family too, because that's part of what we are people who care about our fellow humans, our fellow living entities. I would say humans, but I mean, it's not just humans who are going to be ruined by this climate disaster. It's the animals that are also in our world with us. So I mean, not to be too Pollyannish about it, right? I mean, but it really all of this matters, right? I mean, we are destroying our world at a rapid pace, and as we do it, we are leaving behind the detritus of our society. That's the people that are just left behind, rolled into the dust, run over. Um, and it's as if the leaders of our country, just do not care. And it's not just our country. That's the other thing that's so disturbing. It's not that the head of fascism is rising in America, but everything else is better. I mean, look at France, look at Italy, look at Hungary, look at Poland, look at Russia. I mean, holy sweet Jesus, you
Yeah,
know?
look at Ukraine. I mean, it's yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's this is a mess. This is a real mess. So I don't know what's
There's
gonna.
a good line about this, and that's that capitalism's response to crisis is fascism. That when threatened,
You know,
capitalism and capitalists will always resort to fascism. They would rather that than anything else. Because what is the goal? You know, you talk about businesses, right? Businesses are made up of people, but they are not people. And one of the driving factors in a business is fiduciary responsibility. That means the responsibility to profit, the responsibility to make more money, and so that system will drive everything else into a nosedive. They'll crash the plane into the mountains or whatever because of a series of completely rational decisions, and that's
mm-hmm.
rational from the point of view of the
Right,
business making profit.
right, right, right. No, no. So it's true. I mean, again, we started out talking about drug and drug use and how to save the lives of our fellow citizens in the country. We moved to abortion, but I think these are all elements in a much bigger question of how we attempt to remake our world in a way that is sustainable, just, fair. Um, and there's a million. I love your example actually of the sewers of Milwaukee. I mean, there's a million small things we can do, any one of us, every day. It doesn't have to be take state power and rule like V.I. Lenin or something like that. I mean, in fact, I mean, that's sort of. I mean, I know that history. That is that I don't think we want that. I really do
I'm
not think
into it
we
as long
want
as
that.
I'm in charge. Uh,
That's the whole issue. But the thing is, you won't be. You won't be.
yeah, tell me about it.
That's the thing. And the guys who
That's been
do
my
take
experience.
charge, the guys who do take charge might use the words that we would use, but they're not us. So I think, but there's a million small things we can do to build community, to build coalitions. Remember when we first started talking about this, we were talking a little bit about family, and your uh, your uh, great grandfather, my grandfather, came from Lebanon. And in the 1890s, late 1890s, early 1900s was part of the populist movement, right? Which was a progressive movement, the Grange movement, a specific arm of it. And those guys, saw what was happening to farmers in North Dakota, South Dakota, and the Plain States. They put their money together. They organized. They built silos. They they created banks, co-ops, and they broke the back to some extent at the time of the railroads that were buying their wheat cheaply and selling it dearly and harming the farmers. They did all that. So it's possible to take small steps, and with each small step to organize our communities a little bit more, a little bit better. And the more we see that we're in this together, the more I think the more that we can come together as a really powerful group, a coalition, uh, to demand what we actually know we need and want, which is, as we've stated, a just economy, a system of justice, not a carceral system, and so forth. You know.
Like common sense solutions, and I think
Yeah.
that there's I think there's another, you bring that up, the Grange movement, that is, I think that's really relevant in a couple of different ways, and not just the ones that, they are addressing common sense concerns that affect all these people, and that's how they build power, but also they were broken, because, like a lot of movements, now I can go to my lifetime or whatever. I was involved in the Bernie campaign, not high up or anything, and I've been involved in a lot of stuff. They will go to no end. They will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing to destroy you and to discredit you and to get rid of you. And if you're not expecting
Hmm.
that, then you're in for an unpleasant surprise. So it's, as you do this stuff, wherever you are, whoever you are, you know, expect resistance. Be prepared for the most unfair, unjust, justifiable, and horrible things. Actually,
Hmm.
to bring it back even further, or well, not further than the Grange movement, but into our discussion about opioids. One of the reasons we have this sort of crazy drug epidemic, this explosion of crime and drugs in the U.S., part of Nixon's plan to turn, because he couldn't fight blackness, he fought, associated them with drugs, and all this sort of stuff. This sort of plan, part of that, and part of doing that around the world and spreading the powers of capitalism around the world, was to use, like they did in South America, and like they did in Iran, and like they did in black communities, sell drugs. Bring in drugs into the country. The U.S. part of this is, whatever. Uh, the CIA, and the FBI, all these guys, these national security guys, they do this stuff to undermine these movements. Part of that was taking cocaine from South America, bringing it into the U.S., selling it to black communities, using the money, the proceeds from that, to fund right-wing terror groups throughout the world, particularly in Iran and in South America, to squash leftist movements. And so there is, they will stop at nothing. The powers that be will pull out all the stops, and maybe that'll mean doing what they did to Bernie. If they can get away with that, they'll do it. The lightest touch possible, right? But if
Hmm.
you become if you become the Black Panthers, they'll just kill you. You know,
So the
they'll get
guy,
you.
the one guy who did most of the writing on that, on what you just described, was now a man now dead, who wrote for the San Jose Mercury newspaper. And in the late 70s, 80s, through maybe 90s, this guy wrote, Gary, I'm blanking on his name, but an amazing reporter who was hung out to dry and who finally took his own life. But the reporting that he did was just amazing. Now, there was a Chalmers Johnson, a historian at UC San Diego.
Gary Webb. It
Uh,
was Gary Webb.
Gary Webb, that's right, Gary Webb. Gary Webb, right? His writing was amazing. Chalmers Johnson, a historian at UC San Diego, who was himself, he described himself as a cold warrior, at least at the beginning. At the end, he certainly wasn't. But he wrote about the things that we were doing, our government was doing overseas. And he said, what will happen is these will blow back on us eventually. And I think what we've seen in the last handful of years is exactly that blowback. It's not just Gary Webb's writing on the drugs that came back to hurt us. It's the violence, political instability that we've helped create throughout parts of the world that have now come back on us. It's extremely dangerous. I mean, again, a different issue. Different issue, right? But there are many people who might listen to this. Probably most would know this, but some would not know that Iran is not a country. I mean, it's got multiple issues. There are problems that they've got to fix, but Iran is not a country that has always been, quote, our enemy, unquote, right? It was in 1953, though, that we and our British brothers and sisters, mostly brothers, overthrew their democratic government that created the ground, the, the soil, the fertile soil for this autocratic, religious government that they have today. It's like things don't just happen by themselves. And we talk about the right loves to talk about our insecure southern border. You know, it is a problem. There are problems, but so one of the things that's happening is there are folks from Central America, including, oh, by the way, people from Guatemala, whose democratic government was ruined, destroyed, overthrown by us in 1954. Iran 53, Guatemala 1954. I mean, there are all these things. This is all blowback. We've set these events up. We've set them in motion, and now we can't stop them anymore. But we don't talk about that. We never talk about that. We never talk about our responsibility. And we are responsible. We're not responsible for every bad thing in the world, but we are responsible for those things we did. You know, and you can't unring the bell that's been rung. That is all true. But you can decide which direction you're going to go in the future, right? And we've not seemed to learn that lesson. We have not learned it. We didn't learn it under Eisenhower. We didn't learn it under Kennedy. We didn't learn it under Obama. We certainly didn't learn it under Trump. And I'm afraid we won't learn it under Joe Biden either. We have never learned that lesson. We have never been willing to. It's one of the many lessons that we refuse to learn. Our impact overseas has not always been positive. Another lesson is we refuse to learn the lesson of racism in our history. We will not do it. We do not want to do it, as if somehow we become weaker if we do that. Quite the opposite. There is a beautiful movie by Michael Moore called "Where to Invade Next." It's not about where to invade, but what Michael does in this movie is he travels to multiple countries in the world, and he visits areas and sees things that he wants to bring back to make us better. The movie itself is worth seeing for a million reasons, but one of the things that's most moving in that movie is German high school. And in German high school, they teach the Holocaust. They teach these kids didn't perpetrate the Holocaust. They're Germans. They didn't perpetrate the Holocaust. But they teach the Holocaust to these kids. They teach how it's the responsibility of these kids to make sure something like this never happens again. And one of the most beautiful scenes in that was I don't remember his name, a Pakistani kid whose mom and dad, he's a German, but his mom and dad had been Pakistanis. They moved to Germany, immigrated. And he said, this kid who a generation ago would have been in Pakistan, clearly wasn't responsible for the Holocaust, says, but I'm a German. Now I'm a German. And it's our responsibility to know about this and to make sure that it doesn't happen here or anywhere else again, right? Never again doesn't mean just we don't want to see Jewish people killed. It never again means we don't want to see any Holocaust perpetrated on any people again. The Germans, again, every country's got its flaws and its pluses, but that piece of their education system is just, I think, magnificent. We could learn from them. They're stronger because they recognize it. We're weaker because we refuse to recognize that what's going on, has gone on with white supremacy, has partly ruined our country and continues to. The latest example simply being, but the latest example simply being the latest deaths at the hands of police of young men, young black men. I mean, come on, but it's not just it's young black men and women, but it's also young white men and women. We refuse to deal with the problems that we have to deal with if we're going to be a society that has any staying power. So again, it's maybe a little further.
It's far afield, but it is connected. And actually, so you know, there's this tendency. I think you're bringing up, uh, this sort of, the sort of wanton murder of people of color and poor people, more broadly speaking, actually speaks to a good point in a couple of different ways. One, in that it is a systemic thing. But another that I see, on the left is, there's this sort of tendency to blame, to want to personalize this sort of stuff. So instead, for example, in terms of police violence, to sort of focus on the police aspect of it, being like, oh, it's the cops. They're making this decision, and we need to, whatever. But the thing, I guess, one of the things that I want to push in all this, and it's similar to the drug issue, in that it's not, for example, fentanyl would be another connection here. It's not the big pharma guys that are causing this sort of massive explosion of fentanyl. It's not just any one thing. It's not a person that causes this stuff. Just like the police, killing folks, it is a system. It's not, and the people, the people are just cogs. They could be good or they could be bad. It's
Well, but look at that. Look at that. I think you're right. I'm sorry for interrupting, but look at the
no.
Memphis police officers. Look at the 5 police officers who were just fired. These were African Americans beating to death an African American. This is a system. I think that's the thing. It's really easy to say, well, it's just that white guy, or it's just that black guy, or it's just that black guy. This is a system that is corrupt, that views a police system, for example, that I think views us as the enemy. They are essentially an army of occupation in our cities. This is a huge problem. That is not to say that there are not good and decent and flawed human beings who are members of those police forces. I mean, I've known in my town a bunch of them, decent guys, some not so decent others. But it's got to be addressed as a systemic problem, not as your problem. You're the problem. I mean, that does happen. There are individual, quote, bad apples, unquote. But
Sure.
This is a system that's designed for oppression, and it succeeds magnificently in providing that. It certainly doesn't succeed in preventing crime. That is for sure. That is for sure.
Yeah. No, it's not big.
So
pharma,
no, so I'm with
not,
you. I mean, but I think it's a good point. The point you make, though, is a really important point. It's a very good point, and I think it's better to be talking about. I think it's better to, generally speaking, speak in terms of the systemic problems of the system that we can address, rather than trying to cull and then isolate some select group. That there may be issues that you have to deal with that individual group, but in general, and again, this is, I think, our worldview. In general, we are there are good people everywhere in all walks of life, and it's up to us to try and make that goodness come out even more, and find the goodness in others who maybe it's a little harder to see it in. Give them the opportunity, and I think that's what we need to. That's what we do. I think that's what we do.
I think that's the answer. It's
anyway,
like so many things. Yeah. Solidarity is the answer, right? I mean, maybe
solidarity is the answer. Solidarity is the answer.
It.
Yeah, it's true. That's
I
true.
like it. We fixed it, Uncle Joe.
Okay, my friend. Well, I guess I don't know how long we've been going. We've probably been going long enough for this for now.
So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Subscribe to us so that you can see us again. We're on all the platforms, and just look for us, Comrade Uncle Pod, pretty much everywhere. Thanks for joining us, and thank you.
Yeah, and just to point
Uncle.
out, I'm the Comrade Uncle. Just want to point that out. I'm the Comrade Uncle, right?
I'm the comrade uncle too. I have a nephew.
Uh,
Don't you take this from me.
oh, damn. All right. We're both comrade uncles. Okay. Well,
All
Alicia, good to
right.
talk to you. I'll talk to you
See
next
you,
time.
man.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Yo no canto por cantar, ni por tener buena voz. Canto porque la guitarra tiene sentido y razón. Tiene corazón de tierra y alas de palomita. Es como el agua bendita, santigua glorias y penas. Aquí se encajó mi canto, como dijera Violeta. Guitarra trabajadora, con olor a primavera. Que no es guitarra de ricos, ni cosa que se parezca. Mi canto es de los andamios para alcanzar las estrellas. Que el canto tiene sentido cuando palpiten las venas del que morirá cantando las verdades verdaderas, no las lisonjas fugaces ni las famas extranjeras, sino el canto de una lora